Kristin Hege never thought that owning her own business would mean teaching young professionals how to manage their time. But that's exactly what has ended up happening. Between helping her staff understand when is it okay to take a break and how to reprioritize throughout the week when fire drills pop up and totally fuck up everything that you had planned to do. She has worked with her staff to identify gaps and then create methods with them to get shit done on time. And frankly, sometimes that means that even if you want to go to yoga at 10 a.m. every Tuesday because that instructor is just like, oh my God, gets you so in touch with your chi, there are some weeks that you're just not going to be able to do it. And other weeks, you might have to wake up at 5 or 6 in the morning in order to get everything done you need to before 10 a.m. so that you can go do that class. You'll hear a couple of themes throughout this interview. One is ownership. The second is self-awareness. And the third is communication. Starting at the top, if you take the time to truly look at what you're good at, you can form your days and weeks around your strengths, and then you can build up support systems for where you struggle. Then, once you understand these things about yourself, it's about communicating them to your team, specifically your boss. We all want you to be your best self, and so it's up to you to help communicate to us how to make that happen. And then finally, it's about ownership. You gotta do what you say you're gonna do. And so if you struggle with time management, or even if you're looking for a couple of tips because you think, hell, I'm pretty good at this shit, then I think this is for you. I hope you will find and take away some nuggets of value in this fairly quick interview. Thanks for watching. I hope you love it. Hello, Kristin, my friend, my PR person. Welcome to this episode. I don't know which episode number it's going to be, but it's going to be great, whatever it is. And we are here today to talk about time management and working your life out. So I was talking to Kristin and we were chatting about topics for this podcast, and she has a unique perspective because she is a PR professional. She owns her own business. So like anybody who owns her own business, she works a shit ton and has to manage a lot of different moving pieces. And she also is an adjunct professor at ASU. She teaches a course to seniors and graduate students, right?
Yeah, there's a few juniors here and there, but mostly upper level seniors and grads.
Yeah. And so she has a unique perspective on being in the workforce for a couple of decades, and then also having a lot of exposure to people who are just getting into the workforce. And she reported that she found herself constantly explaining how to manage time, how to prioritize, how to do all of those things. And I thought, well, that sounds like a badass topic for this little horse and buggy podcast show. So here she is to talk about this. Anything about you that you would like the listeners to know that I might have missed?
No, I think you did a really good job. I think it's a matter of juggling a lot of things on a daily basis that we all find ourselves doing. And if we don't manage it well, it sucks.
Let's just start out sort of broad. What do you find yourself talking to people about every time that they start working for you around time management?
Prioritization is something that I find that I'm constantly having to teach. Things we have to get done in a week never change, but things come in on a daily basis. So how to actually juggle what I have to do right now versus what I still need to get done. And then the bigger picture of and then how am I going to get it all done?
What do you recommend, right? Like, how do you get started really taking a look at how you're spending your day and how to balance your life, or blend? That's the new thing, right? Work-life blend, not balance.
When I have a student or a staff member that's behind, I say, what takes you the longest? So we do a lot of writing in our role. As much as I write, I actually teach a writing class. Writing is actually my least favorite thing to do, believe it or not. But I can't do it from about 11 o'clock on throughout the day unless I absolutely have to. It's when I'm worst at it. So if I'm going to write, I'm going to get up at 5 and write. mainly. I have kids that get up at 7 and 8 and I have to like be present, right? So that 5 to 7 hour, I'm not getting emails, no one's bothering me. I can actually get all my writing done in those 2 hours. Downside is saying that to an employee, they're like, but it's 5 a.m. Like, I get it, but like, that might be when you're the most productive. So be done at 2, if you have that kind of workflow in place that you work. But for me, it's what takes you the longest and let's get that done first. And unfortunately, a lot of people procrastinate the hardest part or the longest part to later. And then it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. I tell my staff, kill what you can control, because so much in our day we can't control. So like, what are you going to kill that you can control at the beginning of the week or the beginning of your day? Something that maybe, every Monday you do something, or you set a calendar reminder every Tuesday for something, but you can control that. So knock that out of the park and then start the other stuff that, just inevitably trickles in. But if there is something that's consistent and you can control it, there's no reason not to kill it. And so that's kind of one of our sayings we say. And one of my staff members here says, all right, today I'm going to kill what I can control because I know this week is going to be crazy.
And do you find that people often don't think that they can control as much as they can?
100%.
That's what I experience a lot, right? Like people are a lot of people complain, I'm on back-to-back meetings. Like every time I hear that, I'm like, so don't do that anymore. Like you can control when you say yes to meetings. Carlos Hidalgo talks a lot about burnout, and he was on a session that I was listening to the other day, and he talked about how he explains to his clients. So he's a consultant, right? And his clients will push a lot of times, like, I really need this meeting earlier. And he'll explain to them the idea that, listen, I'm not going to be at my best if you get me after 2 hours of meetings. It's statistically proven that human beings' brains can only work at peak capacity for about 90 minutes at a time. So if you get me after 2 hours, I am no good to you. I'm not going to be present. I'm not going to be available. So I also feel like there's a tone that you can come at it from where it comes off whiny versus proactive and smart. So Carlos's approach saying it's actually in your best interest to give me 15 minutes of a buffer or 20 minutes or 30 minutes of a buffer so that I can show up better for you rather than this like, no, that's my lunch hour. Right? Like, I don't give a fuck if it's your lunch hour. Like that's my immediate reaction anytime that it's like, well, that's my lunch. Like, okay, move your lunch 30 minutes earlier. Like, what? I don't fucking care. I think it's just important to understand that like in college, you are the customer. So people let you get away with all sorts of shit that in the real world, you're not the customer anymore. If anything, I'm the customer, right? Like as your boss, I'm the one who should be appeased in situations because like I'm in charge of whether you maintain your job or not, if you get a promotion, if you get more money, if you get a bonus. Like I've got a lot of control in the situation. You used to be the customer. People had to give a shit about your opinion. I don't actually have to give a shit about your opinion. Like if you're valuable to me, I will. But if you aren't valuable to me, like stuff it in a sack, I guess. I don't know. So I don't know that I have a question here as much as I'm diatribing about these concepts that like you do have control and make it worth my while to say yes and give you what you want.
Well, I think that's why it goes back to knowing your strengths and weaknesses, because to be fair, some people they may not work for people that make them feel like they have control. So if you know that one of your weaknesses is being dead to, in the mind after 90 minutes, which most of us are of meetings or back to back, whatever, and not being able to speak up and ask for it, then it's never going to work for you. You're never going to do it. So if you know that, like, I know that after 2:00, like strategic thinking is not my jam that much if I don't have to. So I set my meetings with specific clients and different things for earlier in the day, if I can manage it. Right. Because I know my weaknesses. Now that sounds great, right? Like I have my own company. I can make my own schedule. But I think that if you're young in the workplace and you're not recognizing these strengths and weaknesses and acting upon them, right? To your point, asking, can I have a break in between? I had a recent graduate working for me and he called and he was very upset because he said that he saw me turning off my Zoom at like 2:00 in the afternoons a lot for lunch. And he's like, when am I supposed to eat lunch? I'm like, whenever you're hungry. Like, when do you want to eat lunch? Right. And he's like, well, no, I'm concerned you're eating it too. I'm like, are you concerned for you or concerned for me? Like at 2:00 when I'm hungry or when I can find time. And he's like, well, I'm used to eating at 12. then eat at 12. And he's like, well, then when do I get my break? I'm like, when do you need a break? And it's different because they get their schedules in college. They know when they can have the breaks. They know when can they do this. They work in jobs as, like we all did, servers or whatever, where they have 5-minute break, 10-minute break. And then you get into the workforce and they're just like, where's my 12 o'clock lunch? Or where's my break? Like, do you need to go for a walk? Go for a walk if you need to clear your mind. Those are the types of things that I think some of the modern day workforce wants you to own on yourself because we don't want to handhold you. But again, if you don't know that you need a 10-minute break at 2:00, then like that's going to be on you and your performance is going to decline.
Yeah. And it's interesting, because this podcast is targeted towards white collar folks. And so I do think that generally speaking, this isn't factory life where you're working on a team of people running machines and you have very specific scheduled out 15-minute breaks. But that's where a lot of the American economy comes from. And it's where a lot of school derives from too, right? Prepping people in school in order to live a life as a factory worker in manufacturing. And that's not really the case anymore. And so I do think it's interesting to think about, and to give yourself a little bit of grace, right? This podcast was also created because I feel like a lot of people are asking the same question. So although you're going to get some tough love from Kristin and I around like our irritations around being a manager, like at the end of the day, it is pretty routine, right? Like I remember experiencing somewhat of a, what do I do and when do I do it kind of a thing. So I think that this is your encouragement. I think the mass majority of bosses are going to appreciate you taking an opinionated approach to how you show up, when you show up, what kind of work you want to do, rather than sitting back and asking us to define it for you. Because we got shit to do.
Right. Totally. And that's when it comes to priorities. Just because something gets put on your desk doesn't mean it has to be right now. And yes, that could be on the manager for not telling you when it's due or that it isn't a fire drill, but it's also on you to take the onus of, is this fire drill? The more that you know, the easier you can prioritize. I create a list every day. It's like, here's the things that are easy and here are the things that are hard. And I can knock out the easy ones before 10 o'clock. Like I try to do that as much as I can and then get to the hard stuff. But that's just down to personal preference.
And I also think there's this piece where you were talking about when you try to get clients to book meetings. And I have experienced that with you. Our meeting is normally at 10 o'clock on Thursdays, but I've had to move it before. And you've said to me, I'm not my best in the afternoon, but I'll do it. There is an element too of the idea that all of us eat shit every day. Like you don't become a boss and then you no longer have to eat shit. I think that kids think that that's a thing, right? I think that they think that they want respect and they want to get to a certain level and you're not going to have to do shit you don't want to do anymore. But like we all do shit we don't want to do all of the time. Most managers end up doing expense reports. There's nothing worse than doing an expense report, but like it's part of my job. Do you think I love every portion of my job? No. So there's this element of like, do what you can, but you also have to acknowledge that there are just going to be times when you have to suck it up and not love every last moment. And in fact, most of us who are successful have had lots of experiences where we've had to eat shit and do stuff that nobody else wanted to do. And frankly, like learned a ton and been more successful because of it.
Totally. I mean, because I'm a working parent, right? So I have one little kid that deals with anxiety pretty intensely in the mornings. So if I'm not around at 8:30 to actually like his things are, he likes routine. So if I'm not at the front door to wave to him at 8:30 in the morning, it actually affects his day in a big way. Well, a lot of times I have stuff to do. Like I'm working starting at 7, so, whenever, but if I'm there at 8:30, so I have to prioritize my day to be able to do that. I have one client that every other Wednesday, I can't be at the door. Like, and it sucks as a parent, but like, that's the only time they can meet. They're in Canada, right? And it happens and I prepare them and it's fine. But the same thing when they come home, like my kids know they have to be quiet when they walk in the door after school. And sometimes I'm like, that's some bullshit, man. Like, that's just not cool. But the priority of my day is to be done for them later, and around 5 if I can, so that I'm present. So all of these different things and like the ways that even the personal life priorities, like I would consider that my personal life priority to be at the door at 8:30. That matters. That means I'm answering emails at 7 for, 7 and 8 o'clock so that at 8:30 I can do it. And it's not because I earned it. It's because that's what I set up to do so that I can still get my stuff done.
We're sounding a little harsh, Kristin. We're telling the kids, suck it up, manage your day, do the things. Let's talk a little bit about the burnout elephant in the room, right? You're up at 5, you're working all day. How do you manage burnout or suggest to other people to manage it? Because I will say, and you can think about that as I tell a little story, I used to work a lot. So when I was helping to build LeadMD, I worked probably 100 hours a week. There were a lot of times when my husband just wanted to do simple things like watch a movie. And I was like, I can't, I got work to do. No. And I did that for a couple of years. And then I looked back and then I started working less. And I remember very distinctly, we were looking through movies to watch one Saturday and he's like, I saw that already. And I was like, I didn't see that. And he's like, yeah, I think you were working. And he did it like 5 times. There were like 5 movies that I wanted to see and he had already watched all of them without me. And I remember thinking like, well, I don't know that was fucking worth it. Right. So how do you manage that? Like, I do think that there is an element that's hard to recognize when you're in it of I'm just going to work and hustle, and that whole hustle culture having its own identity and thing. I'm not really into it. And I never was like, oh, I'm hustling. It was never like a point of pride for me that I was working 100 hours a week. I just felt like I had to in order to keep the business growing. But do you have any advice, or how do you manage that as, somebody who owns your own company and has really full control over how much you sell, how many new clients you take on? Thoughts?
Yeah. So when I first started out, I was working way more than I am now, because half the time I was looking up stuff because I was totally imposter syndrome, did not even know what I was doing. So I was doing a lot of extra work, educating myself on the side. But I will say that I chose my battles. Like not everybody's like this, right? I'm okay with working a night or whatever if I have to catch up, because the amount of stress that I carry versus the giving up of the one night for work, it balances itself out. So for me, I would say to them, find out what you're willing, where is your compromise? And compromise sounds negative, but like, where can you work, right? I don't work nights anymore. I haven't worked nights in a long time, but I do get up early every now and then. I'd rather give up the early morning than the late at night with my husband when I can finally have an adult conversation after the kids go to bed. Like, I'm not willing to give that up. I'm not willing to give up a Saturday unless I have to. In fact, I take clients that don't have weekend things. Like in my specific tech arena, they don't have a ton of, ribbon cuttings, right? We're not doing those kind of things because that's not what I wanted. But I'm willing to compromise my mornings for my nights. I'm willing to compromise, one night a month where my husband works and I work and we do our thing. But you can't say yes to everything. And if you're working in a place that you don't see an end in sight, I might look for another place. But I think it's what are you willing to give in order to take? I was willing to give my mornings to take my nights back.
Is that a conscious decision that you remember thinking about and making? And at what point does that occur to you? Because I think a lot of people are just sort of floating through life, not deeply considering how they're going about their decision making, and just sort of, getting frustrated and being like, this job sucks, and moving around a lot. And this is the resume jumping that everyone speaks so illy of in the youth today. Because I think that there is a general lack of taking the time to reflect and then make decisions and actually follow through on them.
Yeah, if I'm honest, I think there's this badge of honor that's worn at first, like I call it the busy badge. Like, I'm so busy, oh my gosh, or oh my gosh, I'm so busy at my work. My work is so this. So people wear this badge because you feel important, right? You feel good that you have work, and maybe too much work that you just can't keep up. You're just so blessed. But then it was, how do you want it? Is that all that you are? And I think when you're young, you can hustle, right? And maybe that's what you do. But for me, I was doing it, and similar to your husband's was my son said something, Mom, when you're done sending an email, and I wasn't even working, I was doing something else on my laptop, but they don't know the difference. When you're done emailing, can you watch me do something? And I was like, like stab through the heart. And I was like, what am I doing? Right? I can do this in the morning. It doesn't matter. And I remember that moment. And I was like, yeah, he's not going to see me emailing anymore. It within reason. He does when he comes home from school. It's 3:00. But like for the rest of the times, I wasn't going to do that. And I decided that's not what I wanted to be seen as emailing. So I think when I got past that, I have my business and I'm working so hard, it was like, well, no one cares but you. Like, get over yourself and start working in the morning so your freaking kids can watch TV with you. So that was when I had my first kid. So I'm happy to say that was like 8 years ago.
Kristin, I know you have a very specific, you just held up your pad of paper. So I felt like it might be a good thing to talk about how you manage to-dos, because obviously there are a zillion apps that help you manage this. There's a ton of project management apps. Where should people be documenting their to-do list, or how do they figure out what works for them? Give me your thoughts.
Right. Well, I think the best thing to remember is if you're planning your week on Monday, you're already behind. If I don't know what I'm going to start my Monday with, then my Monday and the rest of my week is shit. So I start planning Friday afternoons. I'll book off time on my calendar for planning on the following week. What do I need to sign out to other people? Maybe you're not a boss and you want to know like what is the top priority for Monday and Tuesday next week. So I plan my weeks for the following week on Friday afternoon. And then I have for my entire team, a Wednesday check-in. So if they have to report something to us, progress of a project or anything. So I have a Wednesday like mental check. All right, Kristin, how much is the rest of this week going to suck for you? Let's figure this out. But it's blocked off in my calendar. No one books it. You're not allowed to book it. And maybe that's something we should also say. If you put these tactical things in place, they can't be compromised, right? So at Friday at 3 is my planning time. Like, I don't take meetings at that time. I know that if I do, it backfires on me. On my Wednesdays at 9:00, like I don't plan meetings at that time, because if it does, I have no idea where I am by Thursday morning for the midweek because I gave up that time. So a lot of people do planning on Mondays, but to me, that's the worst because that's when everything's flying in. If you're already settled Friday at 4:00, you can work for another hour or whatever you do. Your Monday isn't so intrusive, or let's just say that the fire drills aren't as much of a surprise if you already know what your priorities are.
I also feel like you're going to have like the mental capacity to deal with them, or at least finagle where they go and all of those things. If you're trying to plan for your week and manage fire drills at the same time, now I feel like it's not even just the amount of stuff, which is, I think, kind of the crux of this conversation, is that if you don't control things, everything will feel overwhelming. And then you're just spending your time being overwhelmed and anxious, as opposed to controlling and moving things forward, delegating things, moving things over here, communicating. You're not going to get to that until next week, Tuesday, all of those sorts of things.
And I think that's a big challenge for the listeners too, is to actually, test those people around you, because we work together on different things. And how many times have you heard me say, yeah, I have that slated to work on Thursday. Like I plan that way because I know that that's when I'm going to work on something. And to me, it works two ways. One, you have the expectation, you know what it is. But if you're like, I was hoping to have that Tuesday, cool, let's move it around. But if the communication isn't there, I don't think people, there's this fear of saying no or fear of pushing back, when really the risk of not meeting the expectation is actually worse than actually communicating about it. So I would say it's probably not going to be received as bad as you think it is if you push back on those things.
Yeah. I used to always have this saying of good news fast, bad news faster. And basically what that means is if you think someone's going to not like what you say, I guarantee you the only thing that makes them dislike it more is if it takes you forever to say it, right? Like if you think that someone's going to be disappointed that you're going to say, I can't get to that until Thursday, on Monday when they ask, I guarantee you if you wait until Tuesday to say that, they're going to be more annoyed, right? Like, and chances are they're not going to be annoyed at all. And to your point, you're building it up in your head as this big important thing, which most people are very flexible with deadlines. especially again, if you're in a white collar profession, none of us are saving lives. We're not brain surgeons. We're not managing ERs. We're just doing random shit to move businesses forward that most people, if you need an extra day or two, most of us don't care at all. But I do think that a lot of people hold on to bad news, and then that just exacerbates how bad it becomes. Because if you just bite the bullet and rip the Band-Aid off early, how many cliches can I say there? It's just easier, right? Like everybody knows where they stand, and ultimately people just like to be informed of things. So if you know that you have bad news, share it as fast as humanly possible. One of my first jobs, I was working at the Phoenix Suns, and I sent an email to, it was like a nothing list. It was like 2,000 people. And I sent this email that said, thank you for attending the Lakers game. You might be interested in an upcoming Celtics game or something like that. And I sent it to people who had not attended a Lakers game. They had attended a San Antonio Spurs game. And I remember I was in tears, and I went immediately into my boss's office, and I was like, I'm the worst email marketer ever. I just sent an email saying, thank you for attending the Lakers game to people who attended the Spurs game. And it was like this huge thing. And she was like, what was that list? Like 2,000 people? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, I don't care. Like there's going to be like 100 people who see it. It's no big deal. And I was like, oh my God. But if I wouldn't have talked to her about it right away, I would have been like, oh my God, when am I going to tell her? Oh shit. Like she's going to be so mad. And I would have built it up in my head and been wasting all of this time just being anxious about something when turns out it was no big deal to begin with.
Yeah, agreed. And I think it comes down to priorities too. Not to make it too management focused, but I will give my staff things to do, but I don't know unless they cry uncle, it's too much. And I think a lot of times people think, oh my gosh, I can't believe she expects me to get all this done or whatever, not just me, but in a role. But it's like, actually, unless you say that you can't, there's really no reason that we would know your limits, because everybody has different levels of, where their peak is. And so if I know that, then I say, oh, okay, cool. I can help with that, or I can give that to someone else. I always tell them all the time, like, that's not a weakness. It's actually a strength. So if you're trying to manage so much without saying, hey, my list of priorities, my to-do list, like, I don't know. I don't think I can get this done. Oh, cool. All right, let's talk about it. Then the next time I assign, I'm learning from you speaking up during those times. And I think, again, it goes back to not being too afraid about it, because either you're going to not perform well and end up getting fired anyway, or you're going to have a tough conversation that it's too much work for you at the moment.
Are you able to plan your full week on Friday? Or are there a lot of unknowns in what you are going to get?
So I get a lot of unknowns. So when I say plan my week, I look and see as far as like what meetings are scheduled. I mean, I'm a service-based business, right? So I look and see what clients meetings I have for the week, what I know is going to have to be delivered during that meeting, what is done, what's not done, and I work backwards. So if I know I have a meeting with Andrea at 10 o'clock on Thursday, and we're going to be talking about awards, and my reward research isn't done, I better put that on my calendar for Tuesday. Right. So that's how I work back. So what am I delivering during those meetings? And most of the time, it's not just me, right? I'm making sure my staff and checking in on my staff and approving on the things that I do have to deliver that they've actually done. So I start, what are the meetings, and go backwards.
Yeah, because I'm obviously from a consulting business to a services-based business for the past decade. And that's one of the things that we train our consultants early on, is this idea that you don't get to leave your day until you make sure that your next day is planned for. And so what do you have to do for your meetings? Specifically, what do you have to have done and bring to the table? Because we're leading a lot of those meetings just like you are. And that means that you certainly can't just show up in the morning and then be like, oh shoot, I don't have like 2 of my deliverables done. But I do think that there's that element of sporadicness. And that too is where if your boss comes up and says, hey, I need you to do this thing, one of the big tools that I think more people, or just young people in general, need to understand is that there's this element of there's only so much time in the day, right? So I think that a lot of times people will just say like, okay, well, I'll do it after I'm done with everything else. But that doesn't have to be your answer. Your answer can be, here's what I plan to do today. What does this take priority over for that list of things that I got to get done? What is this more important than? And a lot of times your boss will probably go, nothing, actually. Okay. Like, when can you get to this? And there's a lot of respect, I think, for that amount of ownership, right? Like, that's really what bosses want. They want you to own your tasks, own the objectives, and understand how you fit into the larger scheme of things. And so, especially as you're starting, if you don't know the answer, you can certainly say, here's what I plan to do today. What is this more important than?
Right. And that's why the Wednesday check-in for me is so important, because something gets pushed every day, right? So hopefully you're pushing the things lower on the priority ladder, but by Wednesday, like, chances are you got to get to those things you've been pushing off. So, and maybe not, maybe you can go to next week. Still, it's like the Wednesday is so important because you get to Thursday and Friday. And that's when, in my opinion, you don't have as much control and the burnout starts to come in because you're literally stressed every single day. But it's not just normal work stress. It's like being buried stress. And that's the worst kind.
Let's talk tactically about how you manage to-dos. So how do you do it? How do people that work for you do it? What advice do you have?
Right. So how I do it, I do my big week on digital to do. So I use actually it's called Ulysses. It's just a note taker app online. And I use it to take notes. I make a to-do list because you can have all different forms of almost like the entire month, if you will, of things that I know from a delivery standpoint that I have to do. Big picture, big things, get fired if these don't happen. And then on a weekly basis, like today, I use pen and paper for my week, my day to day. So every day I start in the morning with my cup of coffee, easy, hard. On one side is the easiest thing, just knock these out, because why didn't I send that email? How many times at the end of the day, you're like, I should have just freaking sent that email. It was so easy. I try to knock all those out early. And then the hard things. And then I think I'm looking at this right now and there's some like big content things I have to write. I know I'm not going to get to today, which means I'll probably get up a little bit earlier tomorrow. It's just how it works for me. But at least I know going in that I have this big thing that I'm going to have done by Wednesday that I'm not going to get to start today. By looking at my easy thing list, it's not going to happen. But my team, everybody works different. So my team I have one person she's all about calendar invites. It annoys the crap out of me, but it works for her because she's holding herself accountable to me. So she knows that, hey, I put it on my boss's calendar that I'm going to get her every Wednesday this list. And if it's not on her calendar, like, it's her way of showing, it's her accountability to herself. She's going to send it to me by Wednesday at 1. So I know it's coming. I might not look out till Friday, but she at least knows it's done on Wednesday at 1:00 because it's on my calendar. So there are little tips and tricks. It's like having the personal trainer, right? If someone's waiting for you, you go to the gym. So if there's certain things, there's no harm in that. Making sure that there is someone else holding you accountable to some of those deliverables.
I love that idea of everyone finding what those little niches are and your own unique perspective on how to achieve them. That's a great tip.
Yeah. I have one other employee tactically that he just has, and he admittedly says, like, prioritization in my day, because he has so much to do. It just sucks at it. He said it's his weakness. So he sends me every day at 9, like, his priorities via Slack. And he sends me his priorities. And then sometimes after he sends it, he'll be like, am I right that 1 and 2 are more important than 3? And sometimes he's not right. And we work on it. But it's his way of getting his day set. If not, he gets buried in the mundane, like, research task that he has to do. But it came with trial and error, him missing a ton of deadlines and us working together to say, where's your weak spot? He's like, I go down rabbit holes. Like, bunny trails are my jam. Like, this is what he does. And so I say, okay, well, if you know that's the case, then what days do you do research? And Friday's his research day, So I know I've said it 100 times, but everybody is different. So just one tactic isn't going to work for everybody, but you have to try different ones.
Mentioned that is one of my biggest pet peeves, which is this idea of people who take notes to do something off of a meeting that they could have just done in the same amount of time that it took them to take that note. And I like to use the good old Nike phrase of just do it on this particular pet peeve of mine. So what I mean by action items that happen in a meeting where you could have just taken the time during the meeting to do it. are things like, if you're in a meeting and there's a question for somebody who is not on the meeting, and it's like, I'll take a note to go talk to that person afterwards. You could probably just Slack them, especially if the information that that person has is a blocker to moving forward and making the meeting super productive. Or there's a lot of times where somebody will have a document saved on their desktop or on their individual drive, and we need to get it into a place to share that document. Just do it right now, right? Like, don't take a note for yourself to go do it later. Like, especially if it's a meeting where people are one-on-one, ask the other person to sit tight for a hot second and just do it right then. Because I once had an employee who would take notes to do all of these little meticulous things. And then she would use it as an excuse, frankly, of like, oh my God, I'm so busy. Look at all the things that I have to do. And it's like, but you could have knocked out half of those things in the moment that you knew you had to do it, right? If you have to shoot an email to someone, just do it right now, right? Like, if it's on your mind and you take a note to do it later, and then you have this big to-do list piling up, it's sort of a cumbersome weight on your mentality, right? You're like, oh my God, I have so much stuff to get done. When really, like, most of that stuff you can just knock out right away.
Yeah. When I have internal team meetings, I make them, and I think this is a trend a lot of people are doing, like 45 minutes or 50 minutes. And that's what those last 10 minutes are for. I have a contrary opinion, and in some ways that it takes people away from focus. I mean, the people that are like squirrel, like they can't necessarily do that sometimes. So that last 10, 15 minutes of the hour, they can do those. And I think to your point, most people, yeah, you can send the meeting, but when they're like, where's this? And then I see them and they're like this the whole time, their eyes are looking off, and you lost them. Like, they're no longer listening. So if you're like a squirrel chaser, maybe, but don't go into your next meeting without doing it.
And I've done this to you before, right? Where you ask me to do something and I say, I'm going to do it right now, or it's not going to happen. Like, I'm not going to remember to do it afterwards. And it literally is like 10 seconds. You, like, I'm sure, check your email or like prepare what you're going to say for the next bullet point, and we like keep it moving. But I think that that's why a lot of people feel like meetings are meetings for meeting's sake. They're not actionable. They don't have action items. Like, all of those sorts of things are kind of partially because people are going back to back to back in our meetings that could have been 45 minutes or 50, and they're not following through on their action items. It's like the biggest complaint I have about meetings is like, you had 2 action items, both were super simple, and neither one of them happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we're wrapping up because that's all the time that I booked Kristin for. And if we're going to talk about time management, I can't go over.
This is true.
On the conversation, it would set a really bad precedence.
Kind of would.
So, Kristin, if people want to find you, if they're like, oh, so you do PR, I'd love to learn more about it. Or like, my company's PR is dog shit and we could use your help. Where do they find you? Where do they go?
You can just go to conveypr.com. You can find me there, all of my team, or look me up on LinkedIn, just Kristin Hege. Be happy to chat with you.
And Kristin's 2 eyes, since Kristin is spelt a million different ways, but we've got 2 eyes and 2 E's in Hege, Hege. Thank you, Kristin, so much for being here and sharing how to wrangle this tricky subject of time management. When I think about the main takeaways from this, I think you can and really should think critically about your strengths and weaknesses when it comes to time management, and frankly, just the way that you work. And then I think taking ownership of actually forming your days in a way that allows you to be at your best, right? And then I think the third thing that I heard you talk a lot about is just talk to your manager. If you're missing deadlines or feeling super overwhelmed, if your manager doesn't suck, they should be able to help you understand what's flexible and what's not, to ensure that you can get everything done, but not hate your life. Thank you again, Kristin, for speaking on this very important topic. I appreciate you, but I think you should get back to work because you have some deadlines, I think. Thanks again. Thanks for listening. And if you have your own time management tips, hit us up on YouTube, Instagram, or Twitter @BigSisBusiness. That's big. If you can't spell big, you don't get to listen to this anymore. Sis, S-I-S, and business, B-I-Z-N-I-S. And if you want to see my face, come on, check out our YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube. And we also have a website, basisbusiness.com. I spelled it before, I'm not going to spell it again, where I post show notes and resources and all sorts of great shit. So until next time, this is your big sis, Andrea, signing off and saying, we can all do better, but you're good enough, sis.